we've got the motion I've put, which has been modified. You okay if I stay as the mover? That's exactly. Okay, and Dave, are you okay with to still second the motion? Which one, sorry? The Well Energy Trust submission.
Simplified it. That's the one.
Yep, going back. And then, Gary, you've got a amendment, thank you. And
talking to Amy, I think we've got it up there.
Yep, and it's seconded by James.
Yeah.
Councillor James, sorry. So we'll go straight to debate. And sure.
Sorry. Because I don't see Gary's as counter. It's not negative on the motion. It's an addition to the motion, I think. Yeah. Well, it's because it's on a different subject. You can do.
Put it this way, I wouldn't support Well Energy, and sorry, I don't know if we spoke, we're just explaining our things. I wouldn't be supportive of asking the trust, Well Energy, to put money into the housing thing, unless it's predicated upon them bringing back the. So it is an either or.
Yeah. I understand the logic. Sorry, I'll withdraw my.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go to debate if anybody wants to debate, or we can go straight to the vote if you prefer. Okay, we're going straight to the vote. So we're voting first on the amendment, the Mallet-Casson amendment. So just to be clear, we're voting on the Mallet-Casson amendment, which is on the board.
Councillor Hamilton.
Okay, so we'll just vote on the hands here.
We're just going to redo it first, please.
Okay, we'll try one more time.
The amendment is lost, 3 for, 8 against.
So we're now going to the motion.
The motion is carried, 10 for, 1 against.
Okay, we're now moving to page 86, item 12, the prostitution bylaw review, determination and consultation. There is a motion on the table moved by Councillor Dave, seconded by Councillor Angela. Did you want to second? Yes, seconded by Councillor Angela. So if we can get that motion up. And maybe could we get you to read the motion out loud, please? Or one of your staff.
Me, arranging.
Yes, yeah. Well, I'm just getting the motion up straight away because I know it's there, and then it directs our questioning and our direction.
Okay, so the Councillor McPherson, Councillor O'Leary motion reads that the Council A, approves that the current Hamilton City prostitution bylaw is the most appropriate means of controlling the issue of prostitution services in Hamilton City, and B, approves public consultation for 1 month from 18 March to 18 April 2019 on the proposed continuation of the current prostitution bylaw.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. Just some questions. A couple of simple things were brought up by the prostitution, I can't remember the name of the group, collective that spoke to us a while ago, about the difficulty of reading the maps. And I see that on page 104, there's a dreadful map there, black and white, that I couldn't understand what streets it includes and what streets it doesn't include. So if that's going to be part of any bylaw, I completely agree with one of their particular issues, which was that, and that was specifically one of their issues is the maps are hard to read.
Yeah, I mean that was just because we've put up the existing bylaw, so that's the existing bylaw, warts and all.
But could have got rid of the warts, couldn't you?
Yeah, but there's, I mean, we can when it comes time to actually...
Okay, is that why the other options have got coloured maps in them?
Correct,
Oh,
yeah,
beg your pardon. Okay, gotcha. Thank you. And look, I'll be honest, I haven't read the whole bylaw. Does it have a definition of prostitution? Or do we rely on some definition in the Act?
Yeah, so I mean, prostitution in the bylaw means the provision of commercial sexual services. We do have a definition, yes, that's correct.
And that's the
101.
same as the law, as the prostitution law?
Yeah, so our definitions are consistent with the Prostitution Reform Act.
Okay. Okay, another issue they raised, or maybe it came up during the debate, was soliciting, which may or may not interest you, but the soliciting is effectively an individual selling themselves on the street, which is no different than other things like nuisance and things like that.
Okay, hang on, Gary.
Aren't some of these things
Can we
covered?
just ask the writer of the report of what the definition of soliciting actually is?
Oh, okay, yep.
Because you've put the words in his mouth
Yep,
and
sure,
we need to know for sure.
So the bylaw doesn't have a specific definition of soliciting, but it just says, under soliciting of commercial sexual services, no person shall solicit within Hamilton City Council area or in any street, road, footpath, road reserve, public place or area.
So that assumes the definition is
Hang on,
not by phone.
Hang on, Gary.
Oh, okay.
Just not quite finished.
Oh, yeah, so solicit is defined in the definitions, but solicitation isn't. So solicit means any person who in any public place offers any commercial sexual service not in pursuance to any invitation.
Okay, so just to drill down what that means, it means a person talking, it's like you're not on the phone, you're not texting someone, you're not walking around with sandwich boards. You go up to a person and say, you want a bit, or whatever it is you say. I'm not good at this stuff, so well, that has never worked for me, so I know that doesn't work. Is that what soliciting is?
Yeah, so I'm approaching another person and offering the provision of commercial sexual services.
So I don't know law. So is that similar to someone going up and begging and saying, or look, mate, have you got $10, or can you give me $20 for petrol? I've run out of gas. Can you give me a lift somewhere? Which I think is all something called nuisance. Now, like I said, I'm not sure of my terminology here, but I just think soliciting is actually, I think soliciting is probably covered by nuisance laws or bylaws or things, or not.
Potentially, I mean,
No,
suppose it's
hang
around...
on. The word commercial's in there, and that makes all the difference. Yeah, and can you read out the definition again? The word commercial is not begging, is not getting something for nothing. Commercial is a transaction. So just read the...
So solicit means any person who in any public place offers any commercial sexual service.
Okay. But why would we care? I mean, assuming we know that prostitution is legal, whether you like
Gary,
it or not.
question, please.
Like I said, why would we care? Why?
That's not a question.
Okay, why would we create an extra bylaw to police something that I think, and I could be wrong, but my proposition to you is that that could be covered by an existing bylaw?
Yes, I suppose our public places does have, and this might be more of a question for Calvin to answer, our public places does have provision to prosecute in relation to nuisance behaviour, which is, I think, what you're suggesting.
Yeah, exactly.
But Calvin will be able to respond better to this.
I would think we are slightly off track there. The commercial sexual services, it's not new. It's a bylaw you've had in existence now for 15 years.
Just because it's been there for a long time doesn't justify it.
Absolutely. The nuisance behaviour and the definition of nuisance as contained in the only true definition of nuisance is in the Health Act, which relates to cesspits and a whole range of other things. And then we've added to that in the safety in public places, which deals with some specific identified activity, which does not extend to or would not include soliciting as the definition has been read out. That would not be included within the definition of nuisance.
Okay, so and this may or may not be an easier way of doing it, could we just include that within that bylaw you're talking about?
That's a separate question. Bearing in mind, under the nuisance provisions, it has to be in such a manner as to cause distress, alarm, or, so it's a significant.
And kind of my point is, if you're being solicited and you don't care, where's the offence, where's the crime, where's the injustice, where's the problem?
Well, Gary, that's for you to...
Yeah, well,
That's not for you to ask the general manager.
having not done
whether-
any of this, I would like to know what is the harm we're trying to prevent?
That's for you to decide with...
No, it's not. I want these,
You
I
can't
don't want
ask a general
experts
manager.
in this stuff to tell me what the harm is.
You
The
can't
harm
ask a
is-
general manager whether he believes that solicitation is right or not, and that's what you're doing.
No, I'm
or
asking
whether
what
it's
the harm
harmful.
is. I'm asking what the harm is.
Well, that's why you're in this position, to make that decision and to vote accordingly. It's not for you to be asking the general manager what his views are on where the solution
No,
is.
I'm not asking for his personal views. I'm asking for his professional views, and the other chaps on the front here, on the law and the definition of what's going on.
The harm is,
Sorry, we just...
You go ahead.
Yeah.
the harm is based on the fact that previously earlier councils have determined there is harm, and that is why they've put in place a bylaw, which was one of the conditions under the Local Government Act for the initiation of a bylaw to start with. So you're asking me to go back retrospectively and consider whether something that was viewed as creating harm 15 years ago, is it still creating harm?
Yeah, I am.
And that's not for, and I would agree with the mayor's assertion that it's not for staff to determine whether that is the harm. That's that, with respect. That's
Well,
an issue,
how do
that's
you
an issue for
define harm?
council.
How do you define harm in one of these other situations?
Well, this is where I'm heading. That's why you're here to vote on this today. It's not your job to ask a general manager whether he sees harm in it. That's your job, and that's why you're here today to vote on this paper. And
But I don't deal with this on a day-to-day basis, and I assume Kelvin doesn't either, because there's not much of it that goes on. But I've never been propositioned by a prostitute. I've never gone the other way either. So I'm just trying to figure out what is the harm we're trying to eradicate?
Gary, that's for you to work out. This is a conscious issue, and it's for you to work out whether you think there's harm there or not. If you don't think there's harm there, then you need to put up a motion or amendment to suit what outcome you want to see. But that's exactly why you're in this chair today.
Yeah,
It's
well, I
your
don't want to
job.
do that out of ignorance. Like, there might be some definite harm that goes on that I'm not aware of.
With respect, it is an issue for the council, the elected members, to determine if this is something which causes harm. What I can provide to you is the number of complaints that we have received, if that provides any context for you to help you with your decision making.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Do you get complaints about it?
Occasionally, but really, I think with 29 complaints.
Yeah, so in the last 7 years, there were 29 complaints in relation to this particular bylaw, and we worked out that 2 of them were potentially related to soliciting.
So in what length of time?
7 years, that's when we started recording them.
The 70s.
7 years.
7 years,
7 years,
sorry.
apologies. Yeah.
So in 7 years, we've had a number of complaints, of which 2 you felt had, or someone has felt there was some validity to those.
No, that was in relation to soliciting.
Soliciting, correct, yeah.
Yeah, which is what I'm talking about.
There's other aspects of the bylaw. It's not just soliciting.
Yeah,
where
so we're
profits are.
we're
Yeah,
still
but
talking
I'm
about
focused
soliciting.
at the moment, I'm focused on the soliciting part of it.
29 covers the whole thing. The soliciting is only one part of it. So some are, not all of those
Oh, some of
complaints,
these are not even, okay.
they're related
Yeah,
to
that's
other
correct.
things under the bylaw.
Okay, well, all right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Gary, I'll come back to your questions, for you for further questions soon. Councillor Dave, just push your button when you're ready again. Sorry, Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, Ricky or Kelvin. How many brothels in residential areas have been identified and closed by compliance staff in the last few years? I think I know the answer.
None as far as I'm aware.
Oh, because I was advised two, that's all.
Well,
One in Morrow and one in
Sorry,
Rivoli, that's all. Yeah.
That
In
was much
my
earlier,
time here, I'm
James.
not aware of
I know
any.
it was very recent.
Not the last few years, it was.
It was recent. Thank you, that's all.
Councillor Angela. Councillor Rob.
Yeah, look, my question is around the legal aspects around the Bill of Rights Act, and given that the lady, the presenter this morning from the Prostitutes Collective raised the Bill of Rights Act, are we vulnerable in that area with our and I no doubt you've had a legal opinion on this, are we vulnerable with the current bylaw, which of course the motion is moving to reset that back into the public discussion? Are we vulnerable with any interpretations that have come about in respect to the Bill of Rights Act that this bylaw is no longer appropriate given case law in that area around the Bill of Rights Act?
I suppose that particular provision's been there since it was originally adopted, 2004, and it has survived that time.
So there's been no case law that would signal us to go and have a look at that case law to see whether or not, because I got the impression from the presenter this morning that we were now operating in contravention of the Bill of Rights Act.
Yeah, I mean, so the legal advice has suggested that that would be a contravention of the Bill of Rights Act, and we have two instruments that we can make a bylaw under, the PRA, which is the Prostitute Reform Act,
Yep.
And the Local Government Act. The PRA allows us only to make a bylaw based on locations and signage, so there's no scope for solicitation under that. But the Local Government Act provides provision under Section 145 to do something to that effect. But the suggestion was from the legal advice is that it would be deemed potentially an unreasonable limit on freedom of expression that may be demonstrably justified under the Section 40 of the Bill of Rights Act. So all staff have done is we've just got a legal review, we've put the information in front of you, and it's up to the elected members in terms of their appetite around the legal risk in relation to that.
Yeah, but my question is there a legal risk? I know that we won't allow solicitation on the streets, which I gather is where this potential risk area lies. Are we risking? Are we taking a legal risk by not allowing that to happen if the Bill of Rights Act suggests that we should be doing so?
The lawyers believe that to be the case.
That to be the case. So
Yeah.
so there is a risk there, however minor it might be or major, there is a risk in continuing with our current.
And again, just on the basis that it's challenged legally. So
Yep.
even if they suggest there is a legal risk, there may be the potential for it never to be challenged, like it hasn't been the last 15 years.
So there's no case.
Not solicitation, no. But the other, you're correct, the other parts of the bylaw were challenged in terms of if it being too restrictive,
Yep.
and it was successful. So
This one, our one was challenged, was it?
our
legal?
one was challenged, yeah.
Okay.
And it was deemed fine by the courts in terms of everything else, but that particular element wasn't challenged. Solicitation,
okay.
yeah.
But there's nothing that you're aware of or our lawyer is aware of that has happened subsequently that requires us to rethink that we need to make changes because of legal interpretations of the Bill of Rights Act?
No, I mean, there's a lot of suggestion from sort of central government when they made changes at the time of the Prostitution Reform Act. They repealed soliciting in the Summary Offences Act. They repealed procuring for prostitution, the Crimes Act. So, and Auckland councils have gone to Parliament twice to ask for some mandate in relation to soliciting. So, I mean, there's a...
There has been some activity in that
activity
area,
in relation to that.
but
When
it's
you
still not
determine
clear.
the level
Yeah,
of risk,
yeah.
I suppose, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Are you allowed to be a hawker as opposed to a hooker in the CBD?
No, hawking is prohibited within what's the central city, what used to be called the city heart, which is now which is the area bounded by Victoria Street, Knox Street, Anglesey Street, and London Street.
And a hawker sells a service or a product for a commercial gain or as in a commercial transaction? Is that what the definition of a hawker is?
In effect, it's slightly different, but in essence, yes.
So we've been are we liable to be challenged under the Human Rights Act, Bill of Rights Act, for prohibiting hawkers from doing their job in the CBD?
No.
Thank you. Councillor Gary.
Thank you. How many times, Calvin, I think it's probably you again, mate. How many times has the bylaw been evoked, if that's the right word?
It was, yeah, would you mean how many times has it been extended, or how many times has it
Sorry,
been?
how many times have we had to prosecute someone or...
We've taken no prosecutions under the bylaw.
Ever?
Ever, to my knowledge. And I say, unless there are some early date ones which I'm unaware of, my research went back as far as we could for the last 7 years, which I was able to find records of, and there's no indication in that period of time that we have taken any prosecution.
Do you know how many complaints you've had over that time?
Yes, 29.
Oh, that was the 29, that's where that came from. Okay. Thank you. So why do you think we've had... Yeah, is the bylaw so blimmin' good that everyone's scared to break it, or is the bylaw so blimmin' good that no one cares about it?
Again, I suspect you're asking me to
Well,
reach a conclusion.
You're the guy who deals with this thing every day.
I mean-
Why is it work? Why is it? Well, I assume that's a bylaw that's working really well,
Well, I guess it's a
or
matter
it's a
of,
bylaw that's not needed at all.
well, it's a matter of context.
Yeah.
I mean, if we've only had 29 complaints against the totality of the bylaw, which is about signage, it's about where commercial sexual services can in fact be provided from, you might suggest that there are limited numbers of complaints. And in fact, most of the complaints that we do receive come from, and I use the word, within the industry, and that's often in the lead up to a major event, sevens or field days, when we have people who set up in areas outside the permitted zones. And so there's some self-regulation from within the industry when they make complaints to us about a new provider who has set up in an area which is in breach.
Oh, okay.
I mean, so in terms of that aspect, it works well.
Okay. Thank you. Were you in the room when they gave us their presentation?
I was.
I'm not too sure if the bylaw is meant to consider safety of prostitutes, but there were some issues they raised about safety of prostitutes, and they were, I think, blackmailing and those sorts of was hard. I don't think it was physical harm. I think it was blackmail and stuff like that.
No indication that I'm aware of, but the type of industry would be, in my professional opinion, more likely to attract some behaviours that could give off that impression. But I have no evidence of that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Leo.
Of the 29 complaints which have been received, have there been any complaints concerning the soliciting?
Yeah, I think that was a question that Councillor Mallett had earlier, and we believe that there were 2 in relation to soliciting.
Just 2 for soliciting?
Yeah, the balance of them are commercial sexual activity being undertaken outside the area, the permitted area.
Kelvin, back to you. Why is every city in New Zealand that I visit got solicitation happening openly on the streets late at night and Hamilton hasn't? And I'm talking smaller and bigger and smaller populations than we've got?
And I'm not sure that I can adequately answer that.
That's what I expected, but I just wondered if you might have had.
No,
Is it-
I can't adequately answer
understand.
that.
Is
But I can say is that we do get you know, through the call centre even, we get a number of calls about people querying where solicitation does or can happen. They're told it's prohibited. And so whether that contributes, I don't know. It would only be a small portion. But other than that, I couldn't give you any definitive reason.
So is it possible that we don't have it in our city, which is rare, because we have a bylaw?
I would suggest that
I asked, is it possible that we don't have it in our city when every other city has it,
Well,
bigger and smaller populations?
I think that we are, with respect, slightly deluding ourselves if we think we don't have it. We don't have a visible presence on our public streets. This might be the way I would term it. To suggest that we don't have it would be, in my view, just demonstrably wrong.
So because it's not out there and visible, is that possibly connected to the fact that we have a bylaw?
It could well have some bearing. I certainly don't believe it would be the only reason, but it could certainly have some bearing on that, yes.
Would the police be aware of the solicitation bylaw, and if they did see it becoming an issue, would they be likely to support that bylaw?
I'm not sure I could speak on behalf of the police. Like everything, the police will determine where they're putting their resources based on their prioritisation matrix. So I don't want to, but their overarching philosophy is prevention first. So if there is a preventative aspect to it, I would think they would want to be involved.
Councillor Gary?
Of the two soliciting complaints, how many of them were upheld or caused a breach or something? How many were there?
Neither of them reached anything other than us having some conversation. With one instance, I recall it was with a single person who had some strong views, and we could never, in fact, prove there was anything in terms of solicitation. The complaint was based on a person's perceptions.
A third party said, I think that person's soliciting, rang the council.
Correct.
We went down there and it turned out they just...
Well, we couldn't prove anything.
Yeah.
So in actual fact, that didn't, but we didn't get any further complaints either.
And the other one? Can you remember? Do you know?
Something similar. I don't remember the specifics, but we haven't had either the evidence or the inclination to take a prosecution for anything we've dealt with under this. It's been about actually a lot of it's been about sharing information.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to debate. Councillor Dave.
Can we have the resolution up on the wall? Sorry, because I did want to point to a couple of things there, but I'll start. I believe that staff are doing their job when they put this thing together. I think there's far more in here than was needed. If there'd been, I would have liked to have seen more detailed consultation with council beforehand. And I know I expressed some opinions to the GM, who's not here at the moment in this area, that this was an argument we didn't need to have in Hamilton, because the bylaw and the situation that it governed weren't broken and didn't need fixing. So that, because of that, I've moved with Angela's support and others that we continue with the current bylaw we've got. That's the most proved to be inappropriate, and I believe the most appropriate way of handling the situation. We're required to consult, so I've followed the staff consultation period, but I believe we should be consulting not on a whole range of options and opening up a massive can of worms, that we should consult on the continuation of the bylaw or not. And people obviously can write in alternatives during that consultation period. They have that right. But I was here in 2004 when this first came up. There was far more angst and anger in the community, and stroppy meetings and angry meetings, and councillors getting abused, some of them. councillors lost their seats over this. On this issue, then don't worry about LTPs and annual plans. I think Jeff was here in a different role at the time, and it was mayhem around the place. Siggy was there in a different role as well. I can recall some famous occasions there with her. Look, we're not allowed to ban prostitution in the city, and I think that's appropriate. I think that sorry, we go for 3 minutes. Where did that come in? I thought it was 5.
Let's keep going, councillor.
Thanks. There isn't a problem. We don't need to fix the non-existent problem. The Prostitutes Collective, who spoke this morning, I support the work they do, especially in the health area. I think they do good work. But I think that, and I've spoken to them personally in the past about this as well, they don't understand the Hamilton situation. There was huge community angst. The community accepted that prostitution would be allowed if it was confined to certain non-residential areas. That's what we came up with, and if soliciting was banned as well. We put that in our bylaw. It survived court cases, challenges, and I've just emailed you round a copy of the findings from the 2000, when it eventually came to the High Court in 2007. Our bylaw was upheld, and costs were awarded against the people that appealed against it. The reason I believe there have been no prosecutions is because the bylaw has given staff enough teeth to go along to suspected or complained about cases and move the people on, get the brothel taken out of the house and things. There's been a number of situations like that, but they haven't needed any prosecution because we've had the teeth to move people on into the appropriate area. And just in relation to soliciting, Kelvin described some of that. Back in 2004, when we came up with the same idea, staff advised strongly against it. In fact, complained that we were going against the staff recommendation. I think the councillors showed that this was a political issue, strong community feelings about it, and that the elected members were right at the time, and their decision was upheld in the court. Staff have their job to do, but it's our job to decide what's right for the community at the end of the day. And this is, believe me, a very political issue. If you want to fight the next election campaign over your views on prostitution, as though that was the most important issue facing the city, knock out the bylaw and put it out for consultation again, go for open slather, and you'll have an election campaign about nothing that you want to debate. It'll be all about this. And there'll be a lot of angry people yelling at each other during that campaign. I don't think the city needs that. We haven't had a problem. We've managed to, Kelvin's right, of course stuff is going on, but it's not one that impinges on the lives of Hamilton residents. Let's keep it that way, please.
Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just looking at the Prostitution Reform Act here, and yeah, it does have protection in there for sex workers, but that's more of inducing and compelling persons to provide sex or ones that refuse to provide sex. And the Prostitutes Collective, I agree with Dave, do a fantastic job in the education and protection of sex workers' rights. But I believe that our bylaw is necessary, and a lot of the time we can't enforce it. We don't have the resourcing to follow it up a lot, and I think Kelvin would agree with me there. But it sets a standard of behaviour in our city, and I wouldn't like to see brothels operating next to churches or schools in that sort of capacity. Though we do have Firecats operating in London Street, which is approximately just under 200 metres away from a preschool, which was a concern of mine a couple of years ago when the preschool opened. So in saying that, look, you will get instances of knocking on doors by different people. I know of a couple of brothels that were shut down that people still get people knocking on the door, and there's different people in there now, but they still get people knocking on the door trying to book certain services. Don't get me wrong here how I say this, but I work with prostitutes quite a bit, and that's just in the immigration role. And so look, no bylaw, if we had no bylaw, it would only assist breaches of the Prostitution Reform Act, Section 19, in regards to temporary visa holders in New Zealand working or offering commercial sexual services, which is against Section 19 of the Reform Act. We do find a lot of the foreign sex workers actually work out of motels here in Hamilton. And I do have a list of hotels if anybody's interested in that, but I know that they're operating out of hotels here. There are brothels operating in our suburbs at the moment, and that's just a fact of life. There are small owner-operated brothels operating in our suburbs. A lot of the time we don't even know they're there. But the thing is, I think we do have to set a standard. We do have to have a bylaw to show that we do have certain standards of behaviour in Hamilton we wish to uphold. Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, and I support most of what Dave and James has said. The issue, and I think the bylaw seems to work well. I mean, that's why I was asking, trying to figure out what the problems were. What I am concerned with is I hope that in our consultation process that the Prostitutes Collective come back and re-challenge us with their considerations, and certainly the maps was the thing. I'm still not quite sure on where I stand on solicitation and that sort of stuff. That's to me it seemed to be considered covered under another law. But no, I don't think there's anything too wrong with our bylaw. I mean, and it is a consensual activity by grown-ups, provided that's what it is. So I'm not too sure where all the angst comes from. So I will be supporting one of these options. Not sure which one it is. The one that's up there. Yeah. Is that one of the options? No.
I think we definitely need to hang on to the bylaw because it seems to be working. The only thing that concerns me, of course, is are we in breach of the Bill of Rights Act by not allowing soliciting? That's my concern.
Right, a reply, Councillor Dave.
No, I won't. But Gary and Leo both raised the question in relation to soliciting. I just want to point out the bylaw we brought in 2004, which continued in 2009, has survived the court challenge. It hasn't changed its wording in that whole time, nor have the acts governing it changed their wording the whole time. Whether or not there's a claim, I'm sure there are claims were against the Bill of Rights Act, but where's the evidence that our bylaw's been overturned because of that? There isn't. It's the opposite evidence. So I think the community in Hamilton clearly expect us to continue with this. If we need to look at it. It's often we follow courses of action and we get legal challenges, and sometimes we go back and look at things if we think it's enough of a risk or not. But in this case, I think we stick with the 2004 council decision because we were told we were taking a huge risk at the time. But it's survived, and if it's survived, we can make the point to courts if we have to that it wasn't broken and it does work and it's kept community expectations along with all sorts of different laws. So let's keep it going.
Okay, we will go to the vote. All those for? Any against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ricky. Thank you, Nick. We'll now go to page 157, item 14, Special Housing Areas Expression of Interest, round 2. Welcome, Luke.
Good afternoon, elected members. If I just take the report as read, but further to an email that I sent to elected members in SLT yesterday afternoon for the Special Housing Area report, I'd like to make an official amendment to the report noting that recommendation B at paragraph 4 needs to discount any reference to the Endeavour Avenue proposed special housing area and further any other reference to that proposed special housing area is no longer required to be considered as part of this report because of correspondence I received yesterday afternoon from Housing New Zealand formally withdrawing that application. So the report really is seeking 2 recommendations: that it be received and that we carry on with the further evaluation of the Quinton Drive enlarged proposal. And I'm happy to take any questions from elected members.
So just before we get into questions, Luke, can you quickly bring us up to date with where we are with the government and just for the record, and as far as SHA's longevity goes, and how, the timing of getting this one here that we're proposing through in time?
Yep.
And the outstanding other, well, we don't need to go there. We know they're going as fast as they can, so.
Yeah, I'll just sort of break that down into 3 responses. The first one being so we've received official correspondence from Minister Twyford of the repeal of HASHA, in particular the abilities for the government to gazette additional SHAs after the 16th of September, and that is outlined in my report at paragraph 19 onwards. What that means is, in terms of the next steps, is really set out in summary at paragraph 77 of my report. So the decision to not continue with the ability to gazette further special housing areas was made after we had gone out for expressions of interest. So we've got a policy that you've agreed to go out and call for expressions of interest for sites to become special housing areas, and the second tranche was open at the end of last year, and that closed in February. As soon as we found out from Mr Twyford that was the intention of government, we got in contact with every interested party who'd been in contact with us around wanting to create special housing areas, and we informed them of the time frame risks. We gave them every undertaking that we'd work as collaboratively and as proactively as we could to help them through, but ultimately any decision for those parties to progress was one that they would make and one that they would make alone. And as a result of that, we only had 3 formal applications that were lodged with council. The first of those was withdrawn. That was for Carlingford Rise, because they just felt that they weren't in the position to do all the requisite work that was needed by the timeframes that we had set out for them as a result of the repeal of HASHA and the advice had been given from MHUD. Secondly, as I said yesterday afternoon at 4 o'clock, I received a phone call from Housing New Zealand advising us that they were withdrawing their quest. The people behind the Quinton Drive application believe that they can meet these timeframes, and they've asked to continue, and our recommendation is to proceed on that basis. In terms of the wider SHA program, all the other decisions that you've made and the requisite information in support of those applications are sitting with government and with MHUD, and we're just waiting for decisions to be made. And so I'm in contact with them at least once a week to get an update. I wish I could offer you more certainty than that, but it's not a process that we have control of.
So this is the last one that will come through?
This is the last one that will come through.
Okay. Councillor Ryan.
A question to you, if I may, because I know you've been advocating and lobbying directly with the ministers. I find this really frustrating that we've had so much pushback as a council. We continuously are trying to follow their own process. So I guess my question is twofold. One, are you able to explain what direct feedback you've had, and or 2, do we need to write a formal letter from council to expedite this process, because we've got more coming through the tunnel and we're still bottlenecking at the top because of this minister's discretion clause?
I think this is the first true coalition government this country's ever had, and there's a lot of things that happen with this government behind the curtain that we're not privy to, which make it very difficult. So I don't think that the government of the day, the largest government, is trying to trip anything up and slow anything down. they've got coalition partners that they've got to negotiate everything through with. So the circumstances are different than anything else that we've seen in the past.
I'd like to move the staff recommendation, but with an extra bullet point saying that we'll have some sort of formal letter to seek a response, because we've got Te Awa Lakes and others that are heavily invested in this process, and I just don't think it's fair, and council's in suspense. So
probably myself and Richard have probably had several meetings in the last month directly with ministers on this issue.
with respect, it's been a little bit off the grid, and I'm just wanting us to go through formal channels and get some potential press around it, because we need to do the best by our citizens and ratepayers and expedite this, this housing crisis. And, yeah.
But I think by showing the government up in a public way like that would possibly have the reverse effect of what we're looking for.
I'm not saying to do it in an elegant way, but to do it in an elegant but formal way, just to say this council's potentially unified in this issue, because we've voted to support this HSA time and time again, and we've got others, they're saying that the tunnel's closing, and then we've got Perry saying this morning to us in a live submission at the other end, we're running out of options, we've got limited tools in the toolbox, and we're getting nothing through the other end.
I'm comfortable asking the Chief Executive to write a letter to that effect. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, thank you. If we could have some motion drafted around that, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. So from the Chief Executive. Our frustrations and the time delays that we've had in processing the SHOs.
Just, yeah, along the line, this council has followed the process to the best of our ability, and we've got stakeholders that are on the end of a fishing hook. But say it better than that. Sorry, I know we're on the fly, but if you draft it, I can liaise while we do questions.
Well, we don't want to draft the letter here. We
No,
just want
just the wording of how
the
that...
intentions of
Yeah,
just
just
flagging from the Chief Executive the frustrations we're having. Okay. All right. Councillor Jeff.
Mayor Andrew. Luke, thanks for this. Hey, just in regards to the Quentin Drive SHA proposal there, I can recall last time there was some concerns from sort of residents in the area. I'm thinking Gilbass around there. I'm a little bit hazy on it, but I do recall there were some issues. Does this enlarged version kind of address any of those or not?
It would be premature of me to I suppose, read the minds of the people who we're proposing to consult with. But you're right. So the first point is that when we notified the adjoining residents of this area, there wasn't a number of submissions that we received on this from people who were opposing it. The principal concern from recollection was proposed access from the site through to Gilbass Avenue. That's not being proposed in this in this proposed SHA, and I suspect that we will get a number of people coming back to us in relation to this matter. So if you look at attachment 2, page 171, that's the area of the mail drop that we want to do. So that's all of the adjoining properties.
Okay.
We're giving them 20 days in accordance with the policy. We'll receive that information and we'll report that back to you on the 29th of April. There's an extraordinary council meeting if you decide to progress with this, that is, and that's where we'll analyse the submissions that, if they come.
Thank you. All right. So look, there is a fundamental difference with the access then.
Yeah, so the original SHA had proposed an access through Gilbass Avenue.
Thank you.
That had then been reworked to actually get access off Quentin Drive.
Yep.
And that's what's being proposed in relation to this revised enlarged proposal.
Okay. Thanks, Luke.
Councillor Robb.
Follow on from Councillor Ryan and also in the context of the two representatives this morning from Te Awa Lakes who presented. They got their tick off from us last June. The promise then from us and presumably from central government was 10 to 12 weeks. That was around December. We're now into March. And I got the feeling from their presentation this morning they still don't know where their application is after 9 months. Are we, and I know there's a letter potentially going to the Minister, but are we able to give them, or is Wellington able to give Te Awa Lakes and presumably also Mr Ma, who presented at the same time, some indication of a timeline as to when their SHA will either be ticked off or not? Because I think that was part of their concern this morning, although I don't think they were necessarily clear in that, as saying, well, you know, we've been waiting for 9 months now, we still don't know, because of a reorganisation in Wellington, when we're going to find out whether we're all go or whether we go back to our private plan arrangement.
All of the requisite information for Te Awa Lakes that we needed to send to the government has gone through last year. What happens is once it goes to the officials at the Ministry for Housing and Urban Development, they package that up and then they write a recommendation to the Minister. Yep. That work has been completed. So the work of the officials at MHUD in relation to Te Awa Lakes is complete. So it is done, and their report and their briefing papers are all with Minister Salisa, and it's with Minister Salisa for consideration. It's been with her for at least 2 to 3 weeks.
No, it arrived on a desk yesterday.
That's not what I've been told. So okay. I'm just going on what the officials have told me. You might be privy to other information, but what I've been told by the officials is that it's been with her for a number of weeks, and it's at the discretion of Minister Salisa. There are no timeframes that are applicable for the Minister to make that decision. And I had a phone call this morning just to check in. I check in once a week, and I checked in with my senior contact at MHUD to say, have you heard anything? Where's it at? And all she was able to advise me was that there's been no change in the situation. It's with Minister Salisa. Minister Salisa is considering the application. And that's all I can tell you. It's that they can't disclose what Minister Salisa is thinking. They won't disclose that. As soon as she makes a decision one way or the other, there'll be some sort of communication through to the organisation, which will be communicated to you and to the applicant. But it's sitting. That's where it's at, unfortunately, and that's part of the process.
They set the 10 to 12 week time frame, did they?
No, the 10 to 12 weeks is more for the officials within MHUD themselves. Okay. So when we give them all the technical information, they take it and package it up, and they write a briefing note and they give it to the Minister. So that's done. But the time frame then for the Minister, that's at the sole discretion of the Minister.
So my understanding back in June was that it would go to MB, who would do a business case test on it, which seems to be the next step after we've done the regulatory overview of the application.
Yeah,
do you think that this new organisation, UHUT, are they basically repeating what we've already done? Are they doing another regulatory view, or are they doing the same business case that I understood MB would be doing, who I gather have now been gazumped and are no longer involved?
Yeah, so prior to the creation of the Ministry for Housing and Urban Development, the Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment, MB, was the government department that was responsible for SHAs. So when MHUD was created, those responsibilities were taken from MIMBI and transferred to MHUD. But the process is still the same. Okay. They don't do a re-evaluation, they just package up the information and provide a briefing note. But we're not privy to that information. We don't see that. We're just informed of the process. They provide a comprehensive report to the Minister with a recommendation. They haven't told us what their recommendation is.
So when we sent the report off last June, have we had any queries back from either MB or or
Yes.
the urban development group?
Yes, we have. Yes, they've come back and asked us for points of clarification, which all we've done is say, point them to where that information is contained in the bundle of documents that we gave them. So when you...
So it was all there, it was all
Yeah,
there?
so
yeah.
what you guys considered in relation to this SHA, if you recall back in June, it was a bundle of documents that was about 600 pages. It had every technical report you could imagine, all of the submissions, all of the various analyses that had gone into the council recommendation. That's exactly the same bundle that they've got. When they've come back and asked us questions, we've pointed them to where that is in that bundle. We haven't commissioned any other information on that. They did write to me at the end of last year, and I wrote them a letter back saying where they had identified some concerns and where I had indicated where those concerns had been addressed in my report and in the technical information. But we've done no new analysis, no new information, and it's my understanding that they have not done any additional analysis or information. They haven't commissioned any other reports, say, for example.
So in respect to other SHA applications that have been sent to Wellington from other local government authorities, have others been approved? I mean, you know, we've sent 3 down. One, which was the Jefferson one, obviously got approved quite quickly and gazetted, but these last 2, which have been there for 9 months, still haven't been. Is the same happening all around the country with the SHA applications, or
I think there are delays, as I understand, with other SHAs. That's
all of them, or just some of them?
I can't say if it's all of them, but I'm aware that there are some delays in terms of processing times within MHUD to do this work.
Thank you for your answers. It's absolutely unbelievable, but you're believable, but what's happening just seems absolutely unbelievable. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very kind of you to say that.
Yeah, I just want to speak in defence of the government. It is a coalition government, and this government really is doing everything they can towards housing. So I just, and this government's been very good to this council and the city, so.
But the results are not really struggling.
It's very, very difficult in a coalition arrangement.
Yeah, well, but it's not happening as they promised it would. Councillor Dave.
Yeah, look, I actually share the concerns of Ryan and Rob in this, and if I'm going to ask a couple of questions or opinions of the manager over there. Would you agree that the reason the government is copping quite a lot of flack in the housing area is because there is a very slow, if existing at all, process emanating from the departments and ministries that advise them?
I think that's a fair comment. I think certainly in relation to Kiwi Bill, there's a lot of commentary and frustration with how that's going, but it is a fairly ambitious program, and standing that up from scratch was always going to be difficult. In relation to SHAs, the reality is that the current minister and certainly and other within the Labor side of the coalition had always opposed SHAs in opposition. So the repeal of HASHA, from my personal perspective, is not surprising.
Nevertheless, this government did make an implicit decision to accept SHA applications and to turn them over and respond, didn't they?
That's true, but equally, just for clarification, that a recommendation from council, even when an SHA has satisfied the very specific tests for a minister to grant or to recommend that something should be gazetted, doesn't mean that within the act the minister has the ability to refuse an SHA, and I think that's what we're seeing at this particular point, is once again my own interpretation.
Sorry, they don't have the ability to refuse, are you saying?
No, they do, as I'm saying. So even though it's very clear that the grounds for creating an SHA in relation to Te Awa Lakes have been met, there is a very significant catch-all.
Are we not facing a situation now, Luke, that they're neither agreeing or refusing, which is leaving the council and the applicants in limbo?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty, not just for the applicant and council, but the submitters who also have an interest in being able to make decisions one way or the other if this project's going ahead.
Okay. Mr Mayor, I think that while I agree with your comments about what the politicians are trying to do in the coalition government, I don't think they're enough aware of the angst in councils like ours about the churn that's going on in things like NZTA and MHUG and MB and so forth over some of these. And it's all, if we want to help the government, we shouldn't be quiet. We should be going to them and say, you're in danger of being scuppered by your own department's inability to act. You know, if you're going to say no, say no. Don't, I was going to use unparliamentary language like bugger around and leave everyone in limbo. You know, that's, if we want to help Phil Twyford and Jenny Salesa and the others who are trying to do, say they're trying to do stuff in this area, and I believe they are, we need to really get it across to them that their own system, bureaucratic systems down there, are going to come back and bite them in the backside and all of us by inference. I think that's where Ryan was coming from before. We need to help them save themselves, really. Would you agree with that, Mr. Luke? I was supposed to ask the question, you see.
Look, my interactions are with MHUD have been very positive, and they've been very positive on a range of initiatives, not just special housing areas, about alternative funding and financing in relation to the corridor, in relation to other matters. I think that they've done their best with limited resources to progress it along. I think it could have potentially been a bit faster, but I think they are working in good faith. That's my sense of my interactions with the people I'm dealing with.
So what's the blockage? Is it literally the minister's desk?
I can't tell you. I don't know. We have a very good working relationship with the right people at MHUD. They're as open with us as they can be. They understand the aspirations of this council. That's my take on it. They understand very clearly that this is a place that wants to grow and work very closely with government. I would be speculating as to why this is taking so long, other than the Tower Lakes, as you know, when it was heard here last year, had a number of parties that were opposed to it. Every other SHA that they're dealing with generally doesn't have that same level of opposition or technical complexity, and I think those are things that are weighing heavily on the minds of the officials and the minister. But once again, they're my own words.
Thanks, Luke.
Deputy Mayor Marsden.
Just if I can come back to page 171 and just come back, I think you might have answered this question.
Yeah.
And this is about the micro details of the Quentin Drive proposal, and that relates to pedestrian and road access with the surrounding neighbourhood, residential neighbourhood, and to the Lake Domain green space area. As I currently read it, it seems very much a ghettoised cut-off, and only drive access from the industrial Quentin Drive with some very limited pathway up to Allison Street. Can you just take us through exactly where that was at? And it was debated and discussed at the previous application.
Yeah, the previous application, if you look at the neighbouring properties immediately to the north of the site, I think it was around either property number 35 Gilbert Avenue, it might have been 33, that there was a proposal to buy one of those sites and use that as a direct access. That was then amended, so that was no longer on as part of this proposal.
That was a result of them
responding to
residents
who didn't want that access.
Then making a preemptive decision before they even came back to council.
Yeah, so that was something that they had amended as a result of hearing the feedback from recollection. A lot of the residents in the Gilbert Avenue area were concerned about traffic flows and coming through. So the access arrangements for this proposal, as they currently stand, are through Quentin Drive.
So, if we look at presidential, we've got the issue of traffic access, but we look at of connectivity where you have a neighbourhood that essentially is totally divorced, bar one little walkway up to Allison Street, from the surrounding residential neighbourhood, and also very, in my view, you have to go up a hill and down, limited access to the lake reserve, you know, to the nearest green space. So, for example, if you live in Remington, Hastings, Gilbis, you have flat, even walkways and access, you know, biking and cycling and walking, whereas this seems to be a kind of a ghettoised, you know, it doesn't seem to relate to. Is that good planning? I'm just wondering what leeway there is, even if we can improve the pedestrian links with the surrounding neighbourhood.
It's something that we can definitely work with the applicant on, but ultimately, if that's unsuccessful, we'll have to report that to you for consideration on the 29th of April. But I agree, if there's an opportunity to create better integration with the existing neighbourhood, that's something that we can work with, but I can't guarantee you that we can get that outcome.
Probably it is what it is, but I just want it noted, and I'd like you to go back, because I'm really intrigued as to why the proposer did not come back to us and our planners when, you know, there are some other compromises, I thought. I can understand perhaps traffic issues, but I cannot understand the notion of a neighbourhood that is totally isolated from its surrounding neighbourhood and the lake. So could we go back and do some stuff on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to note that and to explore those options with the applicant. But if you make a decision to progress with it, that's something we can do.
Sure, okay.
So I just want members to know beyond doubt that we have got on planes specifically to go and talk to ministers in Wellington specifically about this several times, the last time being about 10 days ago. Myself and Richard was down there yesterday. So this isn't something that is just laying dormant from my point of view. This is something that we're really working on elected member to elected member. Obviously, Richard can't speak to an elected member. I know that Luke's team and Richard's side are working very closely with the bureaucrats and you know, the staffers, and that's their job. My job is to talk on the political side, and I'm not letting this lie dormant. I really am really specifically working on this and on a face-to-face way. So I'm still okay with sending you a letter, Ryan, but, from the Chief Executive, but what I'm saying is that this isn't something that we're just ignoring. We're following up with phone calls, texts.
I'll support you in that and make it a bit more public.
Councillor Siggy.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. And I totally believe that you're working really hard in getting that done. But I'm just wondering, I mean, how long or how much has it cost the government to set up all the paperwork for the SHAs or HESHA, and then for us to spend, I don't know how many months till we finally got everything right, and then, what is it, 18 months, not even 18 months it's been going, and they already want to repeal it? How much money have we spent on this? And according to Lale Iremia this morning, nothing, whether they would have put it in before under the old system would have been not much different than under the new system, because it's not really advanced anything. So I would love to know the numbers, because it must have cost a minor fortune to have all that set up, and then the rug gets pulled out from us again, and we'll have something new next week, and we have to work on that with another few $1 million. So that's my challenge, is going back to the government saying, is it worth all that money, or can we have something simplified? I don't know. I don't know whether you know of any of the amounts, or how much all this cost.
So, Councillor Siggy, this legislation isn't this government's legislation.
I'm aware of that, but
and this is when it was supposed to end. This is when it was programmed to end. So
really,
it always had an end date.
Short time. Wow, what a waste of energy that was.
Councillor Mark.
In a way.
Look, I'm happy to second this one, but I'm just wondering, through you, Mr. Chair, if I could ask Councillor Hamilton if we could include the word, and it's just a small semantic thing to make it a little bit more piercing, after where it says Jamie Strange, concerning this council's frustrations around, rather than general frustrations. Excellent, thank you.
Councillor Ryan, the Chief Executive sending this letter, not the Mayor. I deal and I have a close relationship with elected members in Wellington, and I speak face to face with them. The Chief Executive is the person to send a scolding letter or a reminding letter, not the Mayor, in a case when I've got a close working relationship with them where I am heard by them and I don't want to damage that relationship. So I think it's, if it's okay with you, if you could have it coming from the Chief Executive, not from the Mayor.
Yeah, just on that, because Richard's away, I have asked that we can have a date on it, so whether it's care of Lance, I'm okay with that as well, but I just want it expedited. Expedite the expedite.
So, as I was saying, happy to second that.
You may want to add an R in Adern at the end. You may want that to be correct, I suppose. I don't know who Prime Minister Ardern is, but I know who Adern is, unfortunately.
Very good. Okay, so who moved this, sorry? Councillor Ryan, so we're moving into debate. Okay, is there anyone who'd like to talk to this? Okay, Councillor Ryan, right of reply. Councillor Deputy Mayor Martin. No, he's gone. Councillor Leo.
Come back. It's all right, I'm happy to run now. Yes, I've gone.
Yeah, look, I've always been opposed to the development of the Quentin Drive as a housing area, right when it first came to council. And the reasons for this being is, of course, is that there is only one access from Quentin Drive onto State Highway 1, or Kaikatea Drive, as you like to call it. Just the other day, we approved $150,000, and also NZTA have approved $150,000 for a traffic study in this area because of congestion. And there's only one access in and out of Quentin Drive for these 111 dwellings which are supposed to go in there. There's no open spaces allowed for in this area. The western part of the site is located within a low and medium flood hazard area. We're looking at putting 27 dwellings per hectare with lot sizes of around about 260 to 280 square metres, which is pretty tiny as far as I'm concerned. This morning at the drop-in centre, drop-in session that we heard how the industrial land out there at Tarapa North is under quite a bit of pressure because of sales and being an ideal site. And my concern is, of course, is what we're going to have, of course, is we're going to have all our industrial land at the north. We're going to have our people living in the south, which is only going to create more congestion within the city. Just like when we developed this city, we put all our industrial area on the western side and everybody slept on the eastern side, which meant that they had to get across this river, which causes more congestion all the time. It's an area, I think, where we're going to, in the future, look at, I think what we're really going to be doing here is to building a slum area, and I won't be supporting the motion.
Councillor Robb.
Yeah, one of our strategic imperatives is that we, and this has been approved by this council, is that we're the best in business. And while that talks about running our own business, it also means to me how we deal with businesses in our community. And I just have a real niggling question mark around whether we're achieving that when, until yesterday afternoon, we were going to put 2 more SHAs into the system. And as Ryan eloquently earlier indicated, we're pushing more down from the top, but there's a blockage on the way through. And it really concerns me that we become a party to this, irrespective of who is at fault. We need to make sure that we have all of our options and our communications open. I think today when the two Perry representatives called in, I think they had real mystery around where everything is in terms of their application. And I think we've teased a little bit of that information out this afternoon, but I don't think they're as aware as to what's going on as we now seem to be. And it affects our reputation too, that we are the ones promoting to them that we want to move these opportunities through and get central government approval. But how can we honestly do that? And how can we honestly do that to Quinton when we've got two that have been sitting around for 9 months and we still don't know when decisions are going to be made, but we made those, we let those applications go through on the basis of our understanding that they would, and we would have a decision within 10 to 12 weeks. So look, while I'll support this today, I'm really concerned that this proposition is not only doing maybe central government or the coalition or whoever is at fault down in Wellington some harm, it's also doing us some business harm from a reputational basis. And that concerns me because we have very, very solid businesses here, the Perrys. Mr. Ma seems to come with all flags blazing, that he's been very, very successful. And here we have opportunities both for the city and for these businesses that just seem to be bogged down in bureaucratic, in a bureaucratic swamp somewhere. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yes, I mean, obviously with regard to C, I do have a reservation around that, and I hope it can be written in such a way that absolutely acknowledges the open door that has existed from this government to the Mayor and Councillor McPherson and our staff and others. So I will support that on the basis that the letter is constructive and appropriate, because I think the personal relationship is extremely important, and I acknowledge this Mayor in that regard. I, in my questioning, have expressed a frustration that when this proposal started in terms of Quinton Drive, and very much acknowledging Councillor Leo's concerns, there was an original proposal to have some road connection to Gulbis Avenue, and then of course residents in the area, or some residents, expressed concern because of traffic count. And I think we need to make sure that we get the right balance here, because this is about the right of any Hamiltonian in a residential area to enjoy the amenities of their communities. And this is not a situation where residents, by accident or design or whatever, suddenly live in a very isolated, ghettoised type environment. And they should be able to have normal links with the rest of the broader neighbourhood. They pay their rates. They should have equal access to the facility. In this case, the big bonus for people in this area should be the huge Lake Domain Reserve and all the recreational opportunities that gives. I think there may be some traffic issues, and I do pick up Councillor Tooman's point. I would also argue in the public consultation, and obviously each resident in the immediately affected area adjacent to this SHA can make their own calls, but if you gave me a choice to live next to another residential area, even with higher density housing than where I live, or you wanted just to have a big factory wall 20 metres away, or some old houses or warehouses, I think I would have a preference for actually living next to a further residential area personally. And I think we also have to have a bit of posture here. I recognise the concern of surrounding neighbours in terms of the traffic issues. I don't know how serious and significant that would be around traffic movement, but that must not extend to tolerating a situation where we think it's okay for our next door neighbour not to have the access to the lake that we enjoy, not to have access to the green space, to the public amenity that we enjoy, because they live over the fence. That is not acceptable, colleagues, and we should actually, in my view, try and draw a line in the sand. I do want this project to succeed. I do want this project to succeed because, you know, this is more houses. Trust me, I want it to succeed. I really hope we can get a slightly better outcome than what I perceive at this point. Thank you, staff, for all the work you're doing and about to do.
Councillor Dave.
The Deputy Mayor was speaking so eloquently, I thought for a minute the topic was Tamaheri, but it's not, it's Quinton Drive. I think there, as far as I'm aware, there is still foot access for people to the lake area. The lake area is most definitely not just for the people living Rimington, Gilbass and Lake Crescent. It's actually, that is probably one of the 2 or 3 green spaces and blue space. Looking at my map, it's blue anyway, that is for the whole city. There's far more green space down there than most suburbs have. So I think that's a plus for a development in that area. I agree it needs to be connected. I disagree with Leo about a couple of things. One, the traffic access. They're actually uniquely placed in there. If you go and look at a map or go down there, their access out into the main arterial is controlled by traffic lights. So there's a very controlled, relatively easy way to get out, as opposed to all those places that have to wait with no traffic signals and no roundabouts to get out. So if we were in the situation we had 5 years ago, before those traffic lights are put in at Gallagher Drive, Quentin Ave, I would say, for God's sake, don't put anything extra there. But that's not the situation now. We've finally cracked NZTA on that, and I think it's, if you go down there, you'll see it's working okay at the moment. I also don't think it's necessarily, I think by saying there's a problem with using industrial space in the north or down here, we're forgetting about the green donut, which has been shown to us before. In other words, the area of Hamilton's influence, the area where facilities, houses and industry, etc. can go, shouldn't be just confined to the current Hamilton city boundaries. We're talking about, complaining about all the industry being put on the west. That was the problem in the past. Now we're actively talking about where it can also go in the east, just outside the expressway, for instance, plus the whole Ruakura development inside the expressway. I think we're making some big moves to redressing the imbalance that certainly used to be there. The development in the north, I like Rob, I'd be embarrassed if I were having to, I am whenever I have to speak to the Te Awa people, the Perrys, about the fact that there's been so little movement on that and we can't seem to do much about it. So I'm supporting this. The whole idea of SHAs was that housing goes into areas that wasn't originally envisaged or zoned for housing. Otherwise you wouldn't bother, you just do a resource consent application for a subdivision. That's the whole idea of it, is to do the sort of thing we're doing now. So I don't see the problem, provided the design's good, and there is going to be further work done on things like access and designs of both the suburban and the houses. The width of the roads down there was an issue to start with, but they're working on that. So councillors, the alternative to fitting more residential areas within the city, these sorts of places in the city boundary, is to actually eat up more green fields, more productive land outside the city for housing in a far less controlled way than we've done it in the city. And there's been huge complaints about that as well. So you sort of can't have it both ways. We're doing very well with infill housing in the city in terms of the proportions going there. We are following Councillor Bunting's requirements, going up and not out far more than anywhere else, and this is part of that. Let's try and make it work as best we can, but we can only do that if the government pulls its finger and finalises the decisions that are there in front of it to make. So that's the rider, and that's why I do support that sort of letter. I'm totally confident that it will be written in a positive and sensitive way, but it still needs to be written. We need to get it on record. We need to help the government avoid other headlines like Kiwi Build headlines.
Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. Not against in-house filling per se, but you know, not against well-designed houses either being placed in residential areas. However, I have to, at this stage, congratulate Housing New Zealand for withdrawing its application for the Endeavour place. Went to a large meeting last night which had a representative from most houses in the area showing a lot of concern. So obviously Housing New Zealand have decided that their application was now not consistent with the government's direction. Look, the people of Flagstaff were against it. That's not because they're snobby. They are salt of the earth Hamiltonians, but what they were concerned with was the 69 houses in a 2 hectare space, which would reflect badly, or would differ in the area. Councillor Leo referred to slum areas when you put a lot of houses together. It's been well documented that high density housing leads to higher crime rates and also lowering of house prices around surrounding areas. So that's why there was a lot of opposition in the Enderley area. In regards to Quinton Place, it's originally industrial zones, which I think is a better place for high density housing. I'm not sure how I'm going to go with this on, I'm going to wait and I'm going to listen to Councillor Bunting to see which way he goes before I vote. Thank you.
He doesn't know yet himself.
Councillor Mark.
Yeah, no, like I support what James said about the Flagstaff one. I'm glad to see that's being pulled. I would have been screaming up and down if that was still in here, because my understanding of SHAs were that they were going to help lower the house price by providing an abundance of houses, thereby driving down demand. And I was reasonably cynical about it, quite lonely in my view at the time. Feeling reasonably vindicated at the moment watching all this go on, but I'm supportive of in particular C, because Andrew, I think you have done a great job getting down there and getting in the air. I mean, it's a running joke amongst MPs about how persistent you are with them, so I applaud you for that. I think you need to see, or they need to see, that this council's actually getting sick of all the faffing around as well, and I know Richard will send it in a respectful and positive way. Regards, yeah, I was going to echo, well, I don't need to echo the points about the signalised intersection there. I think that is actually a reasonably safe place to have more and more cars coming out of. And I guess slightly contra to the Deputy Mayor's point about how these people deserve access to everything that the people behind them have. Bottom line is, if they don't want to be there, they won't buy there. So they know what they're buying into. So, yep, I obviously am going to support this one, James, because I'm seconding it. And I have nothing else to say.
A lot of reply, Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, again, just echo what everyone said and support, acknowledge the work you've done there. I think this is really about accountability to the to central government, and can't help but agree with Councillor Dave that they may not be aware as to the angst and frustration that I think we're experiencing as elected members, staff, and some of these developers with the process, and wonder if they're working a little bit in silos. So what I hope this does is blow it out a little bit, and I think it's prudent that we take in the Prime Minister. She's aware of what her operators are up to. Phil Twyford, Minister of Housing and Minister of Local Government, Nanaia Mahuta, and our local list MP, Jamie Strange. Let's pull it all together and blow it in the open, make it transparent, and let's get a result for not just our developers but for our people. These two big developments, Perry's and Mar, potentially can house 2,000 houses. That's not insignificant, and that's us being, as Councillor Robb said, best in business, which is something I'm passionate about. We have a duty to advocate for these people, and I think also it's important that if it does fall over, Council has at least created some arm's length with this process and said, hey, look, we're pushing this as best I can now it's up to you guys. So thank you.
Put it to the vote. All those for? Those against?
Councillors Casson and Tooman against. The motion is carried.
Thank you. We'll stop for a short break. We'll be back at 4 o'clock. Thank you.